Right, so there's been some good news recently in the world, and it's to do with the Ukraine crisis with Russia. So what's happened? Well, there's been an agreement in Minsk between Poroshenko and Putin, and obviously there was the German officials and I think it was France president that all got together, made this agreement, which in the next, I think 3 days, by the 15th of February, there is to be a withdrawal of artillery and weapons from the de facto line, release of prisoners from either sides. And so what was the actual crisis? What happened? Well, we saw that there's been a war on the east side, and there was to do with previous president who was going to join the euro. It didn't happen because last minute he pulled out and went towards sort of the Russian side. There was a massive revolt kick off within the country. In Kiev, we saw massive amounts of protests, riots, because they want to be independent. Because Ukraine's only been independent in a short amount of time. So what's happened now is Poroshenko's came in, and he wants to now be a part of the euro. They want, obviously, this European way, countries being together, helping each other. They want to break away from the old Soviet way of living. So what happened with the war? The war started when people, the pro-rebels, Russian rebels, the Ukrainian independent, they want to be part of Russia. And it's a bit like when the IRA wanted to be independent Irish, and then we did the bombings in the UK to get away from the Great Britain and UK become independent. Same sort of things. And these rebels want their independence, they want to be part of Russia. So they kicked off massively, and weapons apparently were being supplied to them from Russia because Putin said these people are Russian and he needs to look after them. So that's why their army come over, protected them, and supplied weapons to them, which some said it didn't, but a lot of proof saying they did. So they were looking after them. At the same point, they come over and they annexed Crimea, which is a little island. It's not really an island because it's still attached to Ukraine, but it's a little tiny island at the bottom of Ukraine, looking onto the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, which is a beautiful place. And they blocked that off and moved. I think it became very Russian, and they sort of annexed it completely away from Ukraine. So obviously this has upset major parts of Europe. You know, you can't just go into a country nowadays and block off part of it and say this is as it's inciting for war. So obviously over a year they've been fighting, over 1,000 people killed in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, in places on the east. It's Lugansk. They destroyed the brand new airports that were built, millions and millions of pounds, millions are homeless. So it's terrible what's happened. But this agreement now, hopefully, is leading towards peace. Hopefully Russia will pull away, Ukraine can sort of tidy up their governments, which they're trying to do, and there's going to be a different kind of voting system for this east side, because obviously it's not just going to resolve like that, the amount of killings and stuff, but it's going to take time. But it's a really positive step. USA and the rest of the world didn't want to supply weapons, even though they started to consider it. They didn't want to supply weapons or send soldiers over, because that just incites potentially another retaliation from Russia. But the whole time Putin was saying it was about peace, Poroshenko wanted peace, but it never really seemed to happen. There was a ceasefire in September which completely evaporated, didn't happen. So they started doing sanctions, and their way of getting back at Russia to try and make Russia pull away and not supply goods and sort of to have less involvement is Apple, one of the leaders, completely disbanded all their products to Russia, and that included Crimea. And banks, I think Visa, MasterCard, all these people pulled away and said you can't sell our products from this date onwards. And the iPad, for instance, was one of the biggest selling items last year in Russia. So for them to lose that sort of product, an Apple connection, is a massive damage, and the inflation just went through the roof. So, you know, financially it's damaging for Russia. It wasn't good. Which probably helped sway them into this agreement a bit more when you've got massive major players like America and the rest of Europe all saying, come up yours, we're not going to support you or supply to you, you're going to have to find your own way in things. So what is the agreement that's being reached? I'll read it out as a list of different items. 17 hours of negotiation in Minsk, and starting from the 15th of February there will be a ceasefire to begin. Heavy weapons to be pulled out beginning on the 17th of February and completed in 2 weeks. All prisoners to be released, amnesty for those involved in the fighting. Withdrawal of all foreign armed formations, weapons and mercenaries from Ukrainian territory. Disarmament of all illegal groups. Ukraine to allow resumption of normal life in rebel areas by lifting restrictions. There will be a constitutional reform to enable decentralisation for rebel regions by the end of 2015, and Ukraine control of border with Russia to be completed by the end of 2015. So it's not just an instant fix, you're looking at the rest of the year to eventually restore the borders of Ukraine. This is what Paul Kirby, BBC News Online editor, has asked: if Minsk ceasefire failed last September, then how is it different now, and how can it work? So they put, if both sides follow the deal, heavy weaponry will be hauled further back from the front line, not 15 kilometres, 9 miles as before, but from 50 kilometres, which is 30 miles, 240 kilometres, for longer range weapons. It would take civilians in Donetsk beyond the range of big guns, as well as residents far away from the front line in government-controlled Kramatorsk. The new ceasefire line is the same as the old, so the rebels would lose some of their gains, but they would keep Donetsk airport. But there is no deal yet on the fate of Debaltseve, a major town where government forces are under siege, and that could prove significant. Ukraine is promised its international border back, a major sticking point, but only after local elections in the east and after a comprehensive deal on decentralisation of the rebel regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. There is much more that can go wrong before that, so it's still not completely resolved. Key unresolved issues including the status of Debaltseve, a government-held town surrounded by rebels that has been the focus of fierce fighting in recent days. Further talks will also be held on self-rule in parts of Donetsk and Lugansk separatist regions. Mr. Putin told Russian television, "It wasn't the best night for me, but it's a good morning." Or double utro. Mr. Poroshenko, who had accused Russia of making unacceptable demands, said that despite tension and pressure, Ukraine had not succumbed to ultimatums. Separatist leader in Luhansk region, Igor Plotnitsky, welcomed the agreement. He said, "We hope that thanks to our efforts today, Ukraine will change and stop firing at civilians, hospitals and socially important facilities." Obviously that's great for everyone. And what is also great, me personally, is I am going to Ukraine in May, going to Kiev and Chernobyl, and I ain't gonna lie, partly back of your mind you are thinking, I'm going to a country that's at war. But hopefully, now with all these implementations going in by May, there should be a lot more achieved. It should be a safer journey. But it's great news. As I say, Ukraine is a country that's been through a lot, and a lot of crap. So you've got to admire the people. But hopefully this all gets resolved. In this day and age, the modern world, there's no excuse for war, killings and murders. People were civilised, were smart and intelligent enough to resolve everything without conflict. So, that was it. I just wanted to give a little summary about what it's about, and it's looking good. It's looking good. So, I will speak to you later. Or paka.